Ambazonia Calling. News, analysis, commentary, opinion, editorials. Ambazonia Calling is a co-production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. Welcome. My name is Ntumfoyn Herbert, and I bring you revolutionary greetings from our studios in Washington, D.C. to all of you, friends of Ambazonia and fellow Ambazonians on Ground Zero and across the globe.
From the travel restrictions imposed on Ambazonians to the harassment, rising xenophobia, arbitrary arrest and detention of our people through immigration raids, the only thing left now is for Cameroon to officially recognize Ambazonia. Willie brought Ade for Ambazonia Calling.
Ambazonians across Europe, Africa, and the United States are gearing up with activities marking the one-year anniversary of the declaration of its independence on October 1st, 2017. Innocent Chia, Ambazonia Calling.
Happy birthday, Mother Ambazonia.
Ambazonia will only become another South Sudan if Ambazonians allow it to happen. I am Sia Jimvo Ambi.
For yet another year, the fluttering blue and white flag cannot fly freely from the state capital in BOYO. This is Lambert Mbom.
Campaigners launched what they called revolution schools, openly stated that schools can wait until freedom. This is the monk from Ibalikumato.
True freedom fighters cannot and should never indulge in kidnapping and extortion. This is Jude Agua Ozugen for Ambazonia Calling.
Ntumfoyn, let me tell you that Lucifer is a destroyer. What people call United Nations, I call it United Nothings.
Today, Ambazonia Calling is declaring a Code 13 alert.
There is no greater foolishness, the crown of shame, the Nyamfuka of the week. Veronique Vetimfe for Ambazonia Calling.
Citizens have allowed a free-for-all political fight. Electing a leadership is not only necessary, it is absolutely critical. This is Manjang Jude Ambe for Ambazonia Calling.
Hello again, this is Ntumfoyn Herbert. Sorry I've got a cracked voice, but there is a lot to get to in this program, so let me just get started. Let me just get going with our editorial for the week. It comes to you a day before the first anniversary of the proclamation of the independence restored for Ambazonia. Here is editorialist Lambert Mbom.
Another October 1st is upon us. It is Independence Day. For yet another year, the fluttering blue and white flag cannot fly freely from the state capital in BOYO. Many of us have been condemned to chant the melodious lyrics of the hallowed anthem, Hail, Hail, Hail this land of glory, from state capitals and foreign cities across the world in the hope of an imminent return home. But no, over the last 24 months, Ambazonians have rekindled the hopes and aspirations of a free and independent Ambazonia and ratcheted the restoration quest. We have knocked on doors, availed of proper channels to seek redress, deprived ourselves of comforts and freedoms, with many making the ultimate sacrifice in blood. And yet, the oppressive dictator continues to test the limits of our courage and the favor of our determination. For some time now, it would appear the revolution has hit a major roadblock, even as La République continues unleashing unabated its genocidal rage upon Ambazonians. There is more than enough to make Ambazonians despair. There are days we wake up and feel like the apostles after the death of their master. Despair and desolation. There are moments when the noise of social media seems to drown out the incremental advancements keeping the struggle aglow. And if you live or follow the Ambazonian revolution on social media, every new day gives you reason to throw in the towel. One thing is clear, we have come a very long way, and life shall never be the same again. Even as the dark clouds seem to be gathering and the enormous failure of leadership staring us in the face and haunting us, there is a silver lining that we must seek out and cling to. The alternative is untenable. The bravery of the young men and women holding the fort in Ground Zero with mere den guns. The determination and zeal of every Ambazonian on Ground Zero continue to fuel this revolution. While naysayers and prophets of doom desperately seek to derail the revolution so they may remain in business, we must never take our eyes off the goal. We must remember that it gets worse before it gets better. Every true healing is painful. When you wonder how much more sacrifice you can make, how much more longer you can wait, just remember that the more, the merrier. Winners don't quit, and quitters don't win. There is no straight line to the restoration of the independence of Ambazonia. We will climb up mountains and descend into valleys, wander through meandering paths. In the words of Winston Churchill, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And so, continue we must, and courageously too. To the valiant soldiers on Ground Zero, courage. To the patriotic Ambazonian fathers and mothers of the Ambazonian Revolution languishing in jails, courage. To Ambazonian refugees in Nigeria and across the world, courage. To Ambazonians internally displaced, those in forests, and all those in the eye of this storm, bearing the brunt directly of this revolution, unsure of what tomorrow looks like, courage. To the leaders and all those in the diaspora, courage. Happy birthday, Mother Ambazonia. What better gift can we afford her than fight to restore her independence? This is Lambert Mbom for Ambazonia Calling.
No time to take time. Happy New Month, the month is here, the month is here. Happy New Month, me loving Papa Yahweh.
Those closing notes of music are from the amazingly talented T-Son, one of Com's most talented artists, son of his father, Prince Yerima Matuntubo, aka Afuakom. We use that brief excerpt of T-Son's music without prior written permission. Hopefully the clip introduces him to Ambazonians and gets them to be connected to his music, because this is an amazing young man who needs all of your support. Nearly every town, village, and hamlet across Ambazonia had its dose of massacres this week, as we hear in the first part of this news wrap-up by Innocentia.
Boya town this morning. Look at dead bodies everywhere.
Ambazonia's capital city, Boya, has been in mourning since the shooting killing Thursday of 7 young Muslim men who were reportedly preparing for their midday prayers.
7 boys were shot dead by the military just this morning.
Observers say the killings are not random and could be Paul Atanganji's ploy to stoke a war between Muslims and Christians that have otherwise peacefully coexisted for several generations.
Genocide, Southern Cameroon. Ambazonia must be free. We need peace, no more bloodshed. Ambazonia must be free in Jesus' name. Pobia, pack and go.
On the same Thursday in Bamenda, over 5 young men were reportedly shot and killed by the genocidal forces of Biya. Meantime, a mother has reported to Ambazonia Calling that her teenage son was gunned down by Biya annexationist forces Wednesday. He was running back home from purchasing phone credit for the family around the Bamenda airport in Bafut. As many as 15 civilians were reportedly shot and killed in Ekona, a suburb of Boya in FAKO state, on Monday by Biya colonial forces. Absent from the scene this time were the staged den guns or red Odeshi waist and armbands. Over 80 inmates from the Womb prison in MENCHUM state northern zone of Ambazonia are now free thanks to the dastardly act of the Tiger freedom fighters. In a sign of true collaboration, the leader of the ADF, Dr. Ayabacho Lucas, reached out to the leader of the Tigers, Martin Achuo, informing Tiger One that Reuters had erroneously contacted the ADF, thinking they were responsible for the breaking and release of prisoners. Both leaders were interviewed by Reuters. Some reprieve has been reported following several days of intense fighting in Bafut. Our sources are reporting that after over 3 days of extensive looting and destruction of property, including animals and food crops, and shattering windows and doors, even of churches, La République du Cameroun soldiers were finally forced into retreat by 7 Qatar freedom fighters. Ambazonians across Europe, Africa, and the United States are gearing up with activities marking the 1-year anniversary of the declaration of its independence on October 1st, 2017, the outcome of a roadmap designed by the Movement for the Restoration of the Independence of Southern Cameroon's MORISC. The liberation fight has survived largely on the determination of fighters on Ground Zero and the grace of God. Government-enforced power outages have gone into effect in at least 3 states in Ambazonia's northern zone. NGOKETUNJIA, BOYO, and DONGA-MANTUNG have been without power since Monday. The situation is expected to worsen in the days ahead as government brings in stuffed ballot boxes under the cloak of darkness. Balinyonga in the northern zone has lost one of its most prestigious kingmakers. Batita Langa was gunned down by a trigger-happy mixed patrol of La République du Cameroun occupation forces battling against Ambazonian freedom fighters. Mimi Info reported that a young man was also killed in the random shootings early Friday. Stay tuned for more stories that made your news through the week. You are listening to Ambazonia Calling.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
Still ahead in this edition, we have The Devil Unmasked with Professor Emmanuel Tatamenta. We have a winner for the Nyamfuka of the Week. And we are not done until we have heard our letter to Joshua. So stay tuned, kick back, relax, and enjoy Ambazonia Calling.
Missing from the first part of that news wrap-up is the massacre which occurred at Bachuantai on Tuesday morning, when colonial forces broke into the home of a villager. They dragged out the man and 3 of his sons. All 4 of them were then summarily executed in their own backyard, and their mortal remains abandoned at the scene. Besides those killings, 2 police officers were reportedly killed at Mile 4 on the way to BOYO from Victoria on the southern zone. The number of casualties from an entire day of gun battles opposing colonial forces and restoration forces Saturday in Mutengene had not yet been communicated at the time Ambazonia Calling was being put to bed. Fighting was also ongoing in Bangem in the southern zone. Here's Innocentia with the second part of our news wrap-up for the week.
The former chair of the MANYU elements in the United States of America, CSICO Dr. Peter Ako, has rebuked all Southern Cameroonians who are not siding with their people because they consider themselves CPDM elite. The title holder said his remarks were at the urging of his ancestors. Unscrupulous and certificate manufacturing CPDM mayor of BOYO is doubling down on his conspiracy theory that CPDM Southwest elite are plotting his assassination. Speaking Friday to reporters about a cell phone video footage shot in Douala Wednesday in which he was almost killed in a crossfire, Patrick Ikema dismissed claims that the attack on him was the work of separatists.
Say that it was perpetrated by secessionists. It was totally organized by the CPDM elite of the region who attended the launching at Mountain Hotel.
In foreign news, campaign season started in earnest in La République du Cameroun on September 24th, 2 weeks prior to Election Day on October 7th. Incumbent President Biya is expected to easily score another landslide victory. Chance of Biya must go. Biadwa parties were heard at many rallies organized by opposing presidential candidates. The United States Embassy in Yaoundé, La République du Cameroon, has issued yet another travel warning to U.S. citizens living in or planning to travel to the war-torn country. The warning not only makes clear that Ambazonians are targeted for arrest in Yaoundé, it urges Americans currently in La République du Cameroon to stay away from political rallies and to take necessary security precautions. Meantime, in spite of all the evidence of gross human rights violations and extrajudicial killings made evident by heart-wrenching video of the shooting deaths of two mothers and their infant babies in the northern Cameroon by Cameroon's Rapid Intervention Brigade, jointly trained by U.S. taxpayer and Israel, the Pentagon has decided to turn a blind eye to the powerless and opted to continue business as usual with La République du Cameroon. Rights activists have decried the choice. Finally, the American DV 2020 lottery has officially been launched. Applicants can start applying on Wednesday, October 3rd. Given the posture of the current U.S. administration towards immigration, there is a likelihood this might be the last time the program is made available. Innocent Chair, Ambazonia Calling.
Ambazonia Calling. You are in the heart of the news shrine. Call us the Kalakuta Republic of Commentary, Opinion, and Editorials.
Our sincere thanks to Innocent Chair. One more story on which we would like to tarry just a little longer is a story that has been provided to us by eyewitnesses cited by Mbororo rights groups, which state that Amba fighters or persons claiming to be Amba fighters from Bafmen in MENCHUM state in the northern zone, they stormed the Nyos open market on Thursday the 27th of September 2018. According to corroborated accounts received at Ambazonia Calling, the assailants targeted Mbororo herders attending the market. They shot one person, beat up another one, and took 7 herders hostage. No news had been heard of 6 of those abducted. One victim was shot and was attending treatment at the hospital in Bafmen at the time of this report. Away from MENCHUM, a similar incident of hostage-taking resulted in the family of Kari Baye paying a ransom of 500,000 francs CFA for his release, which was secured on Saturday after he had been kidnapped from his home in Kor in Bui State in the northern zone. Ambazonia Calling joins Mbororo rights groups and citizens of goodwill all across Ambazonia in decrying such targeted attacks, summary executions, extortion, cattle rustling, and would like to call on true freedom fighters among the restoration forces to ensure that our brothers and sisters of Mbororo extraction are not the object of targeted killings and acts of looting, extortion, plunder, or threats of any kind. A number of Ambazonians still fear that many fractious factions wrestling for leadership in the liberation of Ambazonia will end up creating a struggle for power at the helm of the state that will make South Sudan look like child's play. Barrister C. Ajimvambe maintains that Ambazonia will never be anywhere close to South Sudan.
A few months ago, we at Ambazonia Calling were very confident that Ambazonia can never be another South Sudan. We were proudly optimistic that our self-defense groups were doing just fine, and that any existing or potential friction among them could be rapidly and peacefully resolved without drawing daggers against each other. Our optimism was largely anchored on keen observation and a well-founded conclusion that the friction among them stemmed largely from disagreements over strategy and not the type of deep-rooted historical antagonisms along ethnic lines that has existed between the South Sudanese Dinkas and Nuers for decades and has caused them to stay in perpetual conflict, turning South Sudan into what some would call a hell on earth. We believe that any issues among our Amba fighters could be easily resolved through communication and genuine collaborative action. Today, our optimism is wobbling on a one-legged stool. Recent events have suddenly turned our hitherto well-organized, well-fraternized, admirable Ambazonia self-defense groups into brothers grabbing and squeezing each other's throats over jurisdiction, territorial boundaries, funding from the diaspora, with accusations and threats flying all over the place regarding the destruction of camps, kidnappings, maiming, and even killing of fellow fighters. Where is all this coming from? Why now? Well, according to vocal, credible Ambazonia activists and even Amba boys themselves, Ambazonia leadership in the diaspora, particularly the interim government group, and some of its ardent surrogates, some of whom pretend to be neutral activists, are responsible for pitting Amba boys against each other with the malevolent intent of destroying the struggle for selfish individualistic interests. An examination of the so-called county-by-county strategy for the defense, reclamation, and retention of territory, espoused by a well-known interim government group surrogate and fully endorsed by the group, lends some truth to this allegation. An up-close look at this strategy reveals that it promotes tribalism and creates or deepens animosity along ethnic lines among our self-defense groups. If such animosity is allowed to take root and blossom, this would most certainly create an explosive civil war situation in Ambazonia that would make South Sudan look like a quiet little town in Switzerland. Backstabbing, counterproductive media campaigns, an almost cultist loyalty to people rather than an objective appraisal of performance and dedication to the liberation quest. These are additional warning signs of an impending collapse of this liberation struggle, which, if left unaddressed, will indeed result in total collapse of the struggle. The challenge for Ambazonians, therefore, is to ensure that the manipulation and planting of seeds of discord among Ambazonians, especially Amba boys, is immediately stopped. Ambazonians must fully investigate allegations levied against all actors of these treasonous acts and bring them to book. Truncate the powers that give them the opportunity to perpetuate such destructive acts. Ambazonia will only deteriorate into another South Sudan if Ambazonians allow it to happen. As wise people say, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good people do nothing, say nothing. See Ajimvo Ambe for Ambazonia Calling.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
Still ahead in this edition, we have The Devil Unmasked with Professor Emmanuel Tatamenta. We have a winner for the Nyamfuka of the Week. And we are not done until we have heard our letter to Joshua. So stay tuned, kick back, relax, and enjoy Ambazonia Calling.
As we heard earlier in this report, far too many of those claiming to be colonial forces or Amba boys are taking advantage of the ongoing struggle for independence. Hostages and abductees are being used as cash cows by persons passing for Amba fighters, while colonial forces continue to arrest for the lone purpose of blackmailing for self-enrichment. Here is Tanya Jude Ozogen.
One dismal story of cruelty and heartbreak that we hear all too often and are increasingly in danger of accepting as a new normal is the odious crime of hostage taking followed by extortions. At first, the perpetrators tended to be exclusively the colonizers' armed terrorists. It was their modus operandi for 57 years of colonial domination. It is now undeniable that armed individuals calling themselves Amba boys Let me be clear that it is a tiny minority as with the colonial forces as well, but this small group act worse than armed bandits and give everyone else a bad name. It is a devilish twist to a war whose bloodshed, beside claiming so many innocent lives, was already bleeding the economy of Ambazonia. We have heard 1,001 sad story and can tell only one or two in a paper this short. Armed men claiming to be Amber boys kicked in the door to the home of a 75-year-old retiree in Santa in early September. They roughed up the frail man, handcuffed him, and drove him off a makeshift private jail. The bandit told their victims that his children in Britain and United States will have little trouble raising and wiring the money with which to buy his freedom. He was released only after relatives and friends paid a 2 million franc CFA ransom. A part of that money came from the old man's life savings. Similarly, the mortal remains of a fallen Ambazonian had to wait 90 days in Victoria because armed men in Mabanda insisted that bringing it to its final resting place required a ransom of 21 million francs CFA. Again, the armed men said the late person's relative in Britain will raise the funds. There are more stories of mortal remains having to be cleared in cash in order to be transported via flying boat for burial in Mundemba. There are stories of Mbororo herdsmen being waylaid on their way back from cattle market and any money on them stolen. Notwithstanding the bad boys, there are also happy stories. They include stories of Amber boys assisting to provide security for families struggling with grief and helping them organize funerals. Ambazonian parents with children or spouses in the United States or those believed to be affluent are the most targeted. The worst abuses and ransom takings continues to be perpetrated by the colonial forces and the militia they hire. While addressing the colonial parliament recently, Honorable Chinda stated that people are routinely and arbitrarily arrested in an undeclared curfew in Ambazonia and are forced to bribe their way out of detention, often facing extortion bills averaging about 250,000 francs CFA. Sadly, today, more than a month after leaders agreed that all funds raised in Washington, D.C. be disbursed to the three groups with self-defense unit on ground zero, the disbursement has not happened. It is hard not to decry this for what it really is. The groups or individuals holding on to this money are no better than those extorting money on ground zero. As we have repeatedly said here at Ambazonia Calling, true freedom fighters cannot and should never indulge in kidnapping and extortion. This is Jude Agua Ozugen for Ambazonia Calling.
Welcome to our special interview segment, The Devil Unmasked, The Truth Out.
Welcome, Professor Tatamenta, to our special interview segment, The Devil Unmasked.
Ntumfoyn, Calvary greetings to you and our beloved listeners as we unmask the devil running riot even while on steroids.
If anyone can tell our listeners, you definitely can. Kindly tell me how or why I might be getting it wrong that colonial Cameroon is implementing a well-planned genocide in Ambazonia.
Well, Ntumfoyn, your observation is supported definitely both by factual evidence and legal definitions. The crime of genocide involves a wide range of actions, including not only the deprivation of life, but also the prevention of life. The crime of genocide is proposed for peace treaties by Professor Raphael Lemkin and enshrined in international law, which states as follows: whoever, while participating in a conspiracy to destroy a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, undertakes an attack against the life, liberty, or property of members of such groups, is guilty of the crime of genocide. 2. Whoever, while participating in a conspiracy to destroy a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, undertakes an attack against the life of bodily integrity or properties, biological or practices biological devices like the use of HIV-infected sexual terrorists or sterilizations on members of such groups, like what happened in St. Augustine, which led to the slaughter of Reverend Father Fantek, is guilty of the crime of genocide. And Ntumfoyn, let us look at some constitutive elements of the crime of genocide. The Genocide Convention establishes in Article 1 that the crime of genocide may take place in the context of an armed conflict, international or non-international, but also in the context of a peaceful situation. The same article establishes the obligation of the contracting parties to prevent and to punish the crime of genocide. This is perhaps why the Satanic Republic of Cameroon did not ratify the Genocide Convention. Article 2 of the Genocide Convention contains a narrow definition of the crime of genocide, which includes two main elements: a mental element and a physical element. The physical element we can classify into 5 sections. First of all, targeting and killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent deaths within the group, and finally, forcibly transferring parents and children of the group to another group.
Why, in your opinion, has the United Nations been silent in the face of the ongoing genocidal violence in Ambazonia?
Ntumfoyn, let me tell you that Lucifer is a destroyer. What people call United Nations, I call it United Nothings. Let us look at what happened. Last year, France got $30 billion from Lucifer Paul Biya to corrupt the indifferent, bribe-guzzling United Nothings civil servants to sponge away our case from the agenda, both of the United Nations General Assembly and the United Nothings Insecurity Council. The golden statue and sweetwood garber, Antonio Guterres, lied that he was seeking $150 million for the humanitarian crisis in Ambazonia, which he does not admit anyway. That noise flew past as it went, and we are still waiting for it today. Hence, the internationalization of corruption by Lucifer Paul Biya helped him to buy time and continue his ruthless massacre of Ambazonians right up till today.
Has the devil truly exhausted all his tricks?
No, Ntumfoyn, he has many other deceitful plans in his armory. The most handy one is to be an international outlaw. Lucifer Biya respects no engagement internationally. He takes a boy's delight in being an outlaw in the international system. That is why he can afford to bribe and abduct fleeing refugees from Nigeria back to his lion's den with no repatriation treaty. Another handy trick, Ntumfoyn, is that of deceiving peoples like the United States, Israel, Serbia, and France to help him train and equip Lucifer's genocidal arsenal to maintain his eternal rigging and misleading gangsterism and audacious kleptocracy in Yaoundé. Just imagine how Lucifer Biya roped America, of all countries on earth, into training and equipping his murderous rapid intervention battalion armed with drones to fight against Boko Haram. But the demon is comfortably using the 3,000 trained and equipped Banti Boko Haram fighters to exterminate Ambazonians daily and nightly.
What of the United Nations responsibility to protect, which was adopted under Kofi Annan?
Ntumfoyn, that is laughable nonsense. Let us use Resolution 1973, voted by the so-called United Nations or United Nothings Insecurity Council. It was claimed to save the engineered mobsters in Benghazi, Libya, from being murdered by Colonel Gaddafi. That was a big lie. The truth of the matter is that Gaddafi had to be crushed. Gaddafi's gold dinar floated at was to defeat the United States dollar that Richard Nixon used in 1971 to bring the economies of the whole world under the grinding heels of the United States of America away from the gold standard that is setting in place the dollar standard. France was to be the worst Western loser because the colonial franc zone was to collapse like a pack of cards, and France will lose the steady flow of $500 billion every year from its vassal statelets in Africa. Hence, Ntumfoyn, the responsibility to protect in Resolution 1973 by the United Nations Security Council was a smokescreen to garrison Libyan oil wells, gas and uranium natural resources for the interests of capitalist sharks while bombing Libya back to the Stone Age.
Let's talk about total freedom for Ambazonia. Where are you with that? Where are we with that?
Ntumfoyn, Lucifer Paul Biya is on the ropes. The reversal of a trick used consistently by the demon Biya, the patron saint of evil, from receiving to confusing, tells you that Ambazonia has smashed his balls. Let us remind ourselves of Ali Baba and the 40 thieves. 99 days for the thief, only one for the owner. International law will bring the devil and its flunkies to book. And besides, Ntumfoyn, the battalion or the Battle of Armageddon is coming, and Lucifer Paul Biya and his crime industrial complex must be dislodged from Amberland, even with more additions from the French colonial army, as Honorable Joseph Wilbert prophesied.
What message do you have for Ambazonians who might be tempted to abandon this struggle right now?
Ntumfoyn, as you remember, those who quit never win, and those who win never quit. Time is on the side of Ambazonians. The ground under the feet of Lucifer is giving way, both at domestic and international level. Ambazonia's God is on the throne.
Thank you very much, Professor Tata Menta, and have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. Ambazonia Calling will be right back with more news, analysis, commentary, opinion, and editorials.
Ambazonians need to seek permission from colonial district officers or divisional officers in order to travel out of the districts of origin. Leaving Ambazonia to travel to next-door Republic of Cameroon, Ambazonians already need to obtain what is a de facto laissez-passer. La République is now actively preventing Ambazonians from crossing into their country without a visa, or as it were, without a passport. Here is Wilbert today, who says the only thing that is now left undone is for La République du Cameroun to recognize Ambazonia as a sovereign state.
Recent actions by Cameroonese soldiers and decisions by their administrators and politicians suggest a de facto separation of the two Cameroons. From the recently created border control post between LEBIALEM and MENCHUM division to the frequent military raids that resemble immigration crackdowns to arrest Ambazonians in certain Cameroonese cities like Yaoundé and Douala, it is very evident that we are gradually reverting to our pre-1961 status as two separate countries. A few weeks ago, we saw a video of a transport bus that was set on fire by a council worker in Njombe, ostensibly to stop Ambazonian refugees from coming into their country. Before this incident, in the wake of a massive exodus from Ambazonia, we learned of an order by the DO for BOYO preventing people from leaving the area without a proper reason. Then there was this order from the transport delegate in Bamenda, basically listing requirements for a visa to travel to Cameroon. This act was reminiscent of the infamous apartheid pass law that required blacks to carry passes to move around. Last week, the Cameroonese government ordered the surveillance of certain neighborhoods where large populations of so-called Anglophones reside in Yaoundé. This has led to what amounts to immigration raids in these neighborhoods. When you combine all this with the fact that security has been beefed up in all their towns that border Ambazonia in a bid to prevent more immigrants from coming into their territory, we can see that the proverbial handwriting on the wall is getting clearer by the day. From the travel restrictions imposed on Ambazonians to the harassment fueled by rising xenophobia against people from the northwest and southwest regions living in major Cameroonese cities, the arbitrary arrest and detention of our people through immigration raids, the only thing left now is for Cameroon to officially recognize Ambazonia. After all, don't we have customs border posts on the highways linking our two countries at Up Station on the Bamenda-Bafoussam Highway and at the Miselele Road along the Tiko Douala Road? It is time for Cameroon to end this senseless war and the genocide being perpetrated in Ambazonia and withdraw her troops and her administrators from our territory if they don't want us to live like North and South Korea when this is all over. Willibrod Ade for Ambazonia Calling.
Very often in a revolution, allies or persons or groups fighting for the same cause caress each other for way too long and refrain from telling each other the truth for so long that they cause grave harm to the cause they are defending. As Barrister Manjong Jude Ambe reports, the time has come for every Ambazonian to call a spade a spade. What the heck? Here is his report.
The time has come for Ambazonians to wake up and smell the coffee. I mean, see this revolution for what it has become and where it is heading. Hardly any Ambazonian would say they like the image they see. There's blame enough to go around. Ambazonians just need to look in the nearest mirror to find out who exactly is responsible. Ambazonians are their worst enemies. We are so selfish, cruel, and blind. Reality is staring at us in the face, yet we refuse to see it for what it is. Why? Why, my people? What's wrong with us? Why are we in so much denial? Ambazonians seem to enjoy tearing each other down. Leaders are eating each other for lunch. Ground Zero fighters are swearing to turn their swords against their fellow brothers. This whole madness is fueled by the humongous leadership vacuum at the helm of this restoration quest. Yet we remain mute. Why? Why Ambazonia? It was not always this way. Not so long ago, we let a roadmap serve as the North Star, guiding us to the October 1st, 2017 restoration of Independence Day. We even briefly agreed on the need for a legitimate leader, elected by adult universal suffrage. This requirement was built in as one of the justifications for recognition by the international community. Yes, Ambazonia, we must not only believe, we must accept the fact that for there to be recognition, we must have a legitimate leadership team, not the farce that some of us are quick to hail as a government while vilifying those who are opposed to it. Efforts focus on winning a deeper understanding of and recognition of our plight by the international community took second stage once Ambazonians elected to talk to each other. Like the lizard which survived the fall of the Iroko tree, Ambazonians self-congratulated. All of a sudden, those who had usurped power and their supporters screamed from every rooftop. They did not seek to satisfy any expectations by the international community. That is how we started running around in circles, denying a problem we created, entertaining self-professed dictators, using the pretext that elections don't hold in a revolution to hide their power grab. How do we expect the international community to talk with a self-proclaimed leadership? Which other unelected body would call for its own recognition if that were to happen? We can run away from this all we want, but legitimacy is only conferred by elections. Self-coronation does not count. The international community will not be bullied into accepting Skaku's interim government as the government, no matter how hard the interim government and its supporters scream. At Ambazonia Calling, it is our firm conviction that there is nothing wrong with Ambazonia that cannot be repaired by what is right with Ambazonia. Electing a leadership is not only necessary, it is absolutely critical. Even for those genuinely opposed to elections, even for those who do not believe in elections, it is absolutely impossible for them to deny the fact that it is now a case of strongman Heleb itself, with various frontline organizations tussling for power and positions. Citizens have allowed a free-for-all political fight. Failure to elect a legitimate leadership led to the emergence of multiple self-defense groups instead of one under the legitimate authority. Today, Ground Zero is infected with the same disease that has afflicted the diaspora. Not only is SAKO's ASC decreeing itself the only authority, Choayabas ADF and Ebenezer Kwanga Sokadev are returning the courtesy. Listening to the complaints alone is frankly dizzying. Even before we get to BOYO, South Sudan is already looking like a practice session. Such a feeling can only scare the international community from contemplating the recognition we desperately need at this time. Ambazonians must understand and accept the fact that we can never wish recognition upon ourselves. We must fold our pants and sleeves and get to work towards ensuring recognition becomes a reality. Duty calls for a true and legitimate leader, and we must do whatever it takes to answer that call. This is Manjang Jude Ambe, reporting for Ambazonia Calling.
You have plenty of show yet to come, so don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Ambazonia is not the first country in which the quest for international sovereignty and/or the struggle for freedom, the struggle for pay hikes and equality has spilled over into school boycotts. I live in the state of West Virginia here in the United States, where late last year, teachers did not hesitate to shut down all the schools in the entire state for 2 weeks while they campaigned for a pay increase, which the governor of the state granted and made effective in salaries before the teachers ever returned to school. So no one should try to fool Ambazonians that when the trade unions and political demands need to be met, school closures have not been part of the campaign across Africa and elsewhere around the globe. Here is the tribal monk from Ubali Kumato, Vedzekov himself, with a brief roll call of the countries where these similar things have happened.
Colonialism was waging strong in Africa until the late 1950s. Ghana's trade union of teachers combined with other unions in launching a strike that closed colonial schools and raised the price of colonial occupation. Their action so infuriated the repressive British occupation forces that they resorted to the blind repression and bloodshed which led to Ghana's independence. During Ghana's string of coups, schools were closed for several years, although the country was not at war. Schools were systematically forced to close during the civil wars in Liberia and Sierra Leone. Black students and teachers boycotted schools as part of the campaign to topple the apartheid regime in South Africa and to end racial segregation in the United States. One of the biggest boycotts of schools in the United States occurred in February 1964, involving over 450,000 African American and Puerto Rican students in Manhattan, New York. The strikes spread in 1965 to 1966 to Chicago thanks to the campaign by the Chicago Freedom Movement. In South Africa, the anti-apartheid campaign rejected the second-class Bantu education imposed on black schools, where the apartheid regime imposed the teaching of black students using a foreign language. The regime deployed underqualified teachers and imposed Afrikaans as the language of instruction in much the same way as the République du Cameroon has been trying to impose French in Ambazonia. Steve Biko is often celebrated as the amazingly gifted political leader he was, but no one should ever forget that Steve Biko rose to prominence as the leader of the South African Students' Organization. Steve Biko and other South African freedom fighters called for freedom from psychological oppression. Without the closure of schools, the 1976 Soweto protests would have been impossible, and without Soweto's contribution, apartheid might still be alive today. Despite its violent nature, the apartheid regime in South Africa reacted less violently than the BIA regime. In South Africa, over 700 people were killed over a 15-month period from June 1975 and October 1977. The BIA regime has killed over 5,000 people in only 10 months, along with burning down over 110 villages. All around the world, demands around education are inseparably tied to demands for self-government. As now in Ambazonia, the campaign in South Africa focused on rendering schools unworkable and the territory ungovernable. In South Africa, as well as in the United States, campaigners launched what they called revolution schools, openly stated that schools can wait until freedom. This is the monk from Ibalikumato, Vedrikov himself, for Ambazonia Calling.
We don't do foolish, but when there are capital fools out there, we make it our duty to find them, and every week we crown one of them the Nyamfuka of the Week.
Here is Veronique Vetimfe with the rundown of the queens and kings of foolish for the week.
Finishing in third position this week is a US-based security officer who was in the security detail of Seseko Ayok Tabe. Sadly, George Fon has joined the growing ranks of those who are either actively or unwittingly doing the bidding of the colonizer. This week, he joined those who have appeared to be encouraging our self-defense forces to get on each other's throats. George Fon is doing what the colonizers cannot even pay to obtain, and for posing acts that could harm the same self-defense efforts he says he supports. George Fon is this week's third-place finisher for the Nyamfuka of the Week. The runner-up this week is a self-proclaimed Ambazonia self-defense commander who on Monday shared a video reportedly filmed in the town of Motengene in the southern zone. Without disclosing his full names, the commander is seen waving the lone revolver his unit of half a dozen fighters seem to possess. The rest of the fighters are shown on the video waving machetes or Dane guns. The commander claims that he is going on the hunt, not to prevent colonial forces from killing our people, but to find and assassinate General Ivo of the ADF. For electing stupidity to turn his gun against his fellow combatants, this unknown commander is the runner-up for the title of Nyamfuka of the Week. Finishing in first position and claiming the crown of shame this week are two senior officers of the Ambazonia Restoration Forces. Both of them have done a lot to advance self-defense on ground zero, and there is no way in which to ever thank them and their fighters enough for the great sacrifice and willingness to lay their own lives down in order to achieve independence for Ambazonia. Sadly though, and ever since last Monday, Pacho and Field Marshal Oliver of the Red Dragon brought their names into disrepute by putting out messages in which each of them picked up to go after Dr. Lucas Cho Ayaba of the AGC and to promise death to the ADF leader, General Ivo. Notwithstanding the great admiration Ambazonia Calling has for the sacrifices our self-defense forces are making on Ground Zero, we believe that there is no greater foolishness than for a self-defense force to turn its gun against its own fighters and commanders. And for doing so, Field Marshal Oliver of the Red Dragon and Pacho are this week's winners of the Crown of Shame, the Nyamfuka of the Week. Veronique Vetimfe for Ambazonia Calling.
For more stories from around the world, go to the World Wide Web at themissionstribune.com, compassfreepress.com, and africafreedomnetwork.com.
Here is our letter to Joshua.
The story told by every drunk in every off-license bar, in every chicken and beer parlor in Gola, and all across colonial Cameroon is that whatever the Insingan called came out and did in the streets of Obolova a few weeks ago is working. Your political resurrection seems to be happening faster even than those just men had thought possible. I hear you went to campaign in Marwa, that you will actually make campaign appearances in Yaoundé, in Boya, or is it in Victoria, and in Bamenda. I don't understand why they say the rain god followed you to Marwa and caused it to rain so hard that the town was flooded the day you were there. But tell me, Joshua, why are you going to Ambazonia? Why are you campaigning there? What part of your country is called Ambazonia? What part of the memorandum delivered to your people via the United Nations and the African Union did you not understand? I also understand that my letter from last week could not be delivered because the post office in colonial Cameroon does not even work. Well, let me just revisit a few lines from that letter. Power is about to turn on you, Joshua. I don't know if you know this, but power is about to turn on you. There are signs that cannot mislead you. If you doubt me, ask Big Brother Bob Mugabe. It happens when the once grateful nation stops chanting Toujours Shoga to you, having come to the conclusion that if you had anything, it was only the looks, nothing else. You didn't have love, you didn't have patriotism, you didn't have anything. That is when the people vomit you, Joshua. They join the military with the tanks out in the street, dancing and spitting on your grave even before one has been dug. It is the fate of every ruler of a banana republic, especially one who has misruled the republic for 36 years, and one who has young people, just screaming to take over power, who are giving you nightmares. It is good to be a dictator, Joshua. You have at least 3 political lives. You may live 9 lives and be capable of dying twice before your first death. I saw the list of those enrolled to vote in colonial Cameroon. There were too many clear signs on it, revealing to the world that you are just a fraud, Joshua, that you intend to fraud your way to the presidency. Let me be generous and share some of those facts with you. Did you notice, Joshua, that your friend Atanganji, the one who dropped out of school, he could not even add up the 10 regional subtotals to provide a grand total for registered voters? Now take a look at the tally again, Joshua, and you will notice that the grand total given by Eleka, you will see that that grand total is off by several tens of thousands of votes. It is a first unmistakable sign that you intend to rig the election, Joshua. The second sign is that your Elecam has 10 subtotals for registered voters in each of the 10 regions. And for each of the 10 regions, you have a number of registered voters that is in each case, in all 10 cases, it has those 3 final numbers rounding up as 0, 0, 0. Every single one of the 10 regional subtotals ends with 000. I mean, where in the world do you find an electorate that ends with 000 for every one of 10 regions? Joshua, wake up, man. What do you think people are? Fools? I mean, I told you how stupid this your school dropout Minister of Territorial Terrorism is. I mean, who commits electoral fraud by simply announcing to the world, come and catch me? Who does that except a guy who is so dead in the head? Let me not waste any time on this election, because where is it going? It's not going anywhere. And in any case, what you need to know, Joshua, is that you're going to the International Criminal Court. You're going to the ICC. I mean, did you hear from Chief Barrister Charles Taku? I mean, I tell you, the man knows how to charge you with the crimes that will lock you away for a long, long time in the big house. The other day, from out of Kampala, Uganda, he did not beat about the bush at all. He just came out there and he said crimes against humanity and genocide was being perpetrated in Ambazonia. That stuff is difficult for Mbelambela, your Minister of Foreign Affairs, to stand in front of the United Nations and claim that that is not happening. You know that the world knows that the genocide in Ambazonia is being carried out ruthlessly, that it is aided and covered up by France, which provides additional cover before the Security Council, and the criminal silence of Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, completes the whole deal. Antonio Guterres may not be able to continue to abuse his office by refusing to evoke the responsibility to protect. There is an agenda item on the ongoing United Nations General Assembly, and a few heavyweights, like former U.S. Secretary of State for African Affairs Herman Cohen, are making sure the world calls you out on your crimes. Maybe you will understand one of these days why it is in your best interest to understand your war, recall your colonial forces, recognize Ambazonia's independence, become the first country to open an embassy in BOYO. If you fail to take advantage while the opening is still there, do not blame Ambazonians. I must go now, Joshua, but before I go, could I please ask you to bring my greetings to Lucifer when you see him later today? Please